Yeah, so as Lucy said, we're kind of big film buffs at the heart of everything we do. That kind of drives our work. I think you'd probably argue you're a better film buff than me and judge my tastes.
I might say that.
That kind of it's always at the root of what we do. And if we're starting a new project, we're always talking about sort of the latest films or even the oldest films as well.
Yeah.
Just going back to the start of sort of our separate journeys that sort of were the start of Trett Films. So yeah, I studied film production anyway, and that was quite a sort of hands-on and quite practical course. So you're constantly challenged creatively, and you're always out making stuff, and that was really good. It wasn't too theory-based. So I was always out there sort of making films, and that's kind of what always fed into the work I did later on. But when I graduated, I didn't actually go straight into video production. I was a teacher at sixth form for about 3 years, teaching video production, although I wasn't doing it as actively as a job at that point. But what was good about that was it sort of shook me out of that 21-year-old art student lifestyle, and I had to kind of look after the well-being of my students. But also, as I was teaching them film production, I had to take a step back and sort of dissect what goes into making stuff. Having always been doing it, I had to kind of take a step back and work out how to communicate how you do certain things and pull off certain parts of it. Almost sort of relearn it in a sense after having done it as a practical way for so long. But I did that for 3 years, and I was really getting the itch to be able to make stuff as a job and do it as a full-time position. So I left teaching and worked for a local B2B magazine company for a few years, and that was a really ideal position at the time. When I moved in, there was no video department. So sort of my role and responsibility was to build the video part of it from the ground up. There was literally nothing to sort of start from, so I had to design what the videos looked like, what they sound like, and all that kind of stuff. And that became a real sort of dream position. I was getting to travel a lot and work with some sort of really huge companies. So I was able to travel and shoot in Hong Kong and Toronto and all around Europe, and work with some really sort of massive companies such as Vodafone. We did Go Compare, Siemens, some real big ones. So that was kind of like the dream, and I was like, well, this is my goal box ticked. I'm doing video production as like my job, and I'm getting to travel the world and film and get paid for it. Like, what's next? But always at the back of my mind, Trett Films was there as sort of like that unticked box, that next goal, basically. So yeah, I kind of really felt like I'd done something there as well. So when it was just me at the beginning, and then I was brought in to sort of build the video team up as well. So once I left, there was a team there who was carrying on the work once I finished. And yeah, as I said, Trett Films was always the goal. But as Lucy said as well, we did it as a side hustle for a long time. We also did it as a hobby for a long time.
Yeah, sure. So we have almost very different routes, but in some ways they do kind of cross over, because obviously Josh was saying he went to uni, and when it got to that point where I had to that next step, I was like, oh, I can do a similar thing. But then I ended up doing a course at City College called the Media Learning Company, and the really interesting thing about that was there's about 13 of us all running basically a media agency, and so we got to work with real clients on real projects. So everything we made, instead of just being like marked on as you are in some things, it actually had served a purpose, which was a great thing to learn all those skills, because obviously working with clients, especially when you start out, you do have ups and downs. Some things don't always go perfectly. But to learn that stuff while you're doing it on a course is much better than doing it in real life and kind of making these huge mess ups. So that was great, and also being in that kind of course structure is they kind of pushed you to try out all the different types of roles that are available, so you kind of found out what you liked or what you didn't like. And I kind of always shone more towards cinematography side of stuff, rather than directing wasn't always my strongest. So like when we work now, you're more of a director and more of the cinematographer. So that was great. And once I finished that course, I went on to work for a local company. They were basically similar kind of structure to what we have at Trett Films, but it was great to see it happen, like actually happening, and how someone else is kind of running this. And obviously, as Josh was saying, we always had Trett Films at the back of our mind, even when we weren't doing it properly. So to see how someone had kind of made that into an established thing was really interesting, and obviously picked up loads of kind of little tips and stuff through that. So once I'd finished that, I worked for as an in-house videographer for an entrepreneur. So he used to teach how to trade cryptocurrencies. So all the content I was making for him was kind of YouTube vlog style stuff. So very kind of basic kind of videos. But I always had this kind of approach to it, of almost making them like they are almost kind of like got kind of a little cinema kind of like bits and pieces to them, or was it to shoot in like widescreen, which is always like the biggest hack to make something cinematic, is put it in widescreen. And so yeah, stuff like that, and just making sure like everything I was capturing, like the shot and like I was kind of capturing all was very much always thought about instead of just like pointing at a camera and shooting and stuff. So that's something that we've obviously carried on to Trett Films. Is not, even if the content of what you're filming is not the most interesting, finding an approach to that which can make it just visually kind of way more interesting than it should be.
Yeah. Yeah, and Trett Films, obviously, when we were doing it as kids, and even sort of today in some capacities now, we made short films just because we wanted to make short films, because we wanted to be able to tell stories, and we were passionate about that. There was no way, we weren't monetizing it at the time, it was just what we wanted to do. And as much as we studied at uni and we worked at other jobs, but we kind of learned the disciplines and skills from making all these short films.
Yeah.
And we took those to film festivals, and they had some sort of mild success on those circuits, and played sort of in different cinemas around the world. But at the time we were doing these other jobs, we were passionate about making Trett Films as a full-time thing, and as I said, we wanted to be able to do things creatively. So it's about taking those maybe corporate approaches to a video and mixing it with what we really like doing, which is making it cinematic and story-driven, basically. So somewhere along the line, we made the decision that this is what we want to do full-time, and anyone that's sort of made that transition has gone between something where you have a full-time job and you have that security of a salary to jumping and doing your own business. There's never really like a right time to do it. There's no sort of like, this is the date you do it and it's perfect and it'll be seamless. So there's always that gamble, and that sort of risk was always sort of hanging over our head a little bit. But we built as much of a foundation as we could, made sure there was some money there so we could pay off rent and that kind of stuff, and that we had some contacts and clients already working with, and then we could just sort of hopefully hit the ground running when we make that transition, basically. Good.
Yeah, so as just was saying, like, one of the biggest things is we didn't ever jump straight into nothing, which would have made it a lot more scarier and a lot more of a risk. We already had clients lined up, so we were working with people who were regular clients instead of just finding one-off like videos to make. We were kind of building these relationships, so it was like, yeah, just repeat clients, and that was one of the most handy things for us, really. And again, as Josh saying, like with those clients, as we started, we were fortunate to be able to travel a lot. I got to go to Vegas and make some videos with some huge companies, which they sound really scary as you're starting out, to then go and work for like companies like TalkTalk and these kind of huge global companies. But yeah, that was kind of like almost jumping into the deep end, which was really great. So yeah, as we started building it as a proper company, we both left and started doing it full time. So we're now in our third year of being a proper business. Obviously, I don't want to touch on it too much because everyone's bored of the pandemic story. But we started building it up to a level, and then obviously just lost everything overnight, which was scary. Putting it lightly. But luckily, as stuff started to kind of settle down, or it wasn't even settling down, like the pandemic was still at the high, but everyone needed video content at that time because everyone wanted to promote that they were still working and still still going, especially afterwards, once everything had opened back up again. People wanted to get out there, which was a great time for us. So that's how we ended up building back a lot of our work. So we're almost from kind of like being really busy, nothing, and then back up to busy, and we've been growing it since then to just get more and more projects, which has been great.
Yeah, so as I sort of said a few times, we're both huge film fans. Pretty much if we're working on a project in the office, if we're not talking about the project we're working on, we're talking about whatever film we watched that weekend or evening or morning or lunch break, whatever it was. And sort of, with films, what we kind of get out of them mostly is the story, and that's what we want to channel into our work. Telling brand stories and telling company stories, but doing it in the same way our sort of favourite filmmakers do. And I know that sort of within certain industries that being a storyteller might be kind of like a buzzword and a tick box, but in what we do, it really is embedded into every single part of it. If you're going to the cinema or if you're watching something on Netflix, there's this sort of like unspoken agreement you have with that director or studio or cinema, whatever. You kind of expect certain things when you go to see a film, and that's some level of production value, decent acting, decent scripts, like a bit of escapism and a decent story. And if sort of you walk away from film and you kind of didn't think it was that good, whether subconsciously or not, it's probably because one of those things wasn't done properly. And so there's so many different ingredients to filmmaking and video production that build into that story, basically. And so, yeah, I guess we kind of think that all the branded content we work on, it's not, we're not making Avengers in Jurassic Park, but, it's stuff for brands that are local, and that has to serve a purpose for these people, but we build in that same approach, really, that all these different techniques are there to really tell the story.
Yes, so I think in terms of like the video landscape, everyone has got to the point, I think, where everyone knows that video is important and that they know that they need it. But the problem with that is if everyone then has video, then almost no one has video because they all kind of blend into one. And you can go through LinkedIn and you'll just see kind of like loads and loads of videos of people kind of talking to camera. So the more important thing is that it's not a tick box, and it should, as important as like a website or anything else you put out there, because video can be the first thing that potential clients can see. So making that as something that stands out has become more important than just having it now. So that's where kind of we come in with like the kind of story side of things, that we try and make these kind of as if my approach to stuff is always if you can get someone to watch a video on a subject they have no interest in already, or even when they're watching it they're kind of like, oh, I'm not that interested in the subject, if they're enjoying watching it. So if you take stuff like how you're saying, like on Netflix, you can watch a random documentary about something you're maybe not interested in, but the way that they tell that story and it's presented to you can make you enjoy it and remember that kind of side of the stuff. So yeah, in terms of just making sure that we're not just doing basic stuff, and even if a project comes to us which is, we just need like this list of stuff ticked off and we need this all covered, we always try and find a way to make it slightly different, and so that, yeah, it's something very enjoyable to watch. And yeah, the way that we always tie it back is the ads that we remember are stuff like the John Lewis adverts, the Sainsbury's adverts, where you actually feel something and you remember that kind of feeling more than the actual kind of process of video itself. So that's always something we try to capture and kind of make it emotional.
Yeah, and in that side of it, create the techniques that you use to create those sort of emotive responses are really varied as well. So as I said, there's so many different parts to what goes into film production. The choices you make on each one of those things really make a big difference. So what the characters are saying, or just the script and the story beats, from what lens you decide to use versus what lens you decide not to use. And we were talking this morning about what percentage of grain you put on a project. That kind of stuff really can alter the emotive response. You have to kind of really look at all these tiny details and sort of obsess over it. If you choose to cut a second earlier versus a second later, what sort of emotional response does that create, and how does that change the story and the whole sort of feeling and emotive response to the whole thing, really? But I guess, yeah, it's as you said though as well, it's not to go rogue and make some like art film with the
David Lynch,
with some David Lynch thing. You kind of have to look, if you're working on a branded piece of content, you look at that company, that brand, and what they have in there. You can build a story from that. So every company has like a color scheme in the most basic way, and you can build that into the visuals. But also, what's their heritage? Where are they based? Can you build that into the plot? What do they stand for? These are all ingredients as well as those technical things that you can really build into the story, really. I think.
Yeah, I was going to cover this kind of side of it, of how we kind of make that starting point on inspirations and stuff, because we take inspiration, like we were filming like an ad recently, which was a small kind of video project, but there was kind of like, when you come into choosing what shot you're going to use and kind of what kind of action you want to use in that, we were using stuff like that we'd seen in films like Skyfall, but you're not having like James Bond jump out of a building or anything, but you take kind of, there was like a shot of someone like looking out of a window, simple things like that, and you're like, I remember this, how that was framed and how that was lit to sell the emotion. So you find stuff like that and then almost make it your own. That's the most important thing, I think. It's not just taking someone's idea or like your inspiration and just making a copy of it. You always got to make it your own thing as well, which is the most important bit of it, really. And all those choices, as you were saying, like every single little thing you have to think about. So when it comes to lighting, if you're telling a story with kind of some sad emotion, obviously the lighting is different to if you're selling like a happy thing or if you're selling a product. So it's finding those starting points and then kind of build the style around it, and every single little thing you have to think about, which is
I think that's the main thing. You just want to be able to challenge what these branded content looks like, but also not just treat it as a tick box of videos done, move on to the next one. Everything gets its sort of TLC basically.
But yeah, that's pretty much,
I think it's all about.
most of it. Yeah, yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Storyboard stuff with pen and paper, is that the way it's going?
Yeah, it depends on the project, but most of the kind of bigger ones we do storyboard. Just, you know, the basic way of just having some drawings.
Scribbles.
Yeah, so
and then
the
we'll
way
send that
that
to someone professional.
neither of us can draw at all, so we always draw these terrible like stick men, and then we send it off to someone who makes it look like almost a piece of art, and it's almost, you can look at those and be like, I was ready to shoot now, because you just have to then basically copy back to it.
We don't always rely on storyboards, but if you're shooting something that, say, has to be 30 seconds and you've got to do so many different points, you want to be able to know that every shot and every second counts. So that's kind of when we use storyboards.
Yeah.
What was the first spark of inspiration for you as kids, you know, as far as film was concerned?
Boredom.
Yeah, lots of boredom.
So
But in terms of like actual films and stuff, James Bond was always a big one.
Yeah.
Kind of launched into filmmaking.
Yeah.
And yeah, stuff like that. And then yeah, most of the films we made were just us kind of play fighting.
I think because we grew up both watching, which we do today actually.
Yeah.
Because we both grew up watching so much films, I didn't realise it wasn't that maybe other kids our age didn't watch as much stuff as we did, because we would like obsess over it a bit, like different films and that kind of thing, and that's still kind of what gets us out of bed in the morning and gets us sort of tackling each project each day. So we're still interested in all that stuff as we were from kids, basically.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm quite interested in the brother dynamic as well. How does that work? And also your business skills as well as creative.
We get the brother question quite a lot. But
do you have fights?
we do, yeah. We don't film them anymore, but we still have fights. But yeah, no, we work pretty well together. I think because, as we were saying, like we grew up together with these similar tastes and stuff. So as a business, we're not like, oh, I want to make it this, I want to make it that. We usually have the same kind of vision on what we want everything to be. But yeah, we do obviously have fights, but almost.
What's disagreements?
Yeah. But the good thing is, because we're not too worried about each other's feelings in the way of like, if you think something's bad, you'll just tell. And the same for you, like you're not kind of like, you know, if it was a friend or like a colleague.
Yeah. No, because we've had this, because we've known each other all our lives, we're able to challenge each other on certain things and not worry about the other person's feelings much, because we know each other well enough to be able to dictate how the other person's going to respond to it, basically.
Brutal honesty.
But as in, I think often when we get this question, one thing I always think of is like, it's not unusual to have sibling creative duos either, especially in sort of the video world. You kind of got like Safdie brothers, one of them's called Josh as well. You kind of got the Wachowski siblings who did all the Matrix films. Coen brothers, Chuckle brothers are up there as well.
Oh, yeah. One of our inspirations.
Marx brothers.
Yeah.
That's great. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I was before my question, I was thinking, my goodness, I've got 3 brothers and I couldn't work with one of them. It would just cause so many arguments. But that to develop a relationship where you can be totally honest with each other is a real thing, you know, and you know, hold on to that.
It is a real benefit, I think, especially because sometimes we're up against the clock and there's so many, because there's at the moment it's just 2 of us. We bring in freelancers for each project, but a lot of times it's just the 2 of us working on it, and we have to be able to say if something works or not.
Yeah.
But it's definitely a benefit, but something sort of frustrating.
So what I want to say is we're so pleased with the film that you did for us. You know, 1 minute film, but so much work went into it for Triple Bottom Line Accounting, and your patience with us post-production as well was. If I just push you a little bit more, you're going to.
We've had much work, trust me.
That was, you know, that we were all happy with the finished product. But what intrigued me while you were talking is what feature film stands out for you that ticks all those boxes of a good story, good production, good cinematography. You know, what stands out, whether it's a recent film or a.
Yeah, I'd say some of the ones less so now, but when I was younger, I always really liked films by David Fincher because of his technical. Sometimes the stories aren't always the most amazing ones, but his technical side of stuff. So every single shot and every single kind of like technical bit, like the music and everything like that.
I mean, he's notorious for being a real perfectionist.
Yeah, which is always interesting because obviously when we're doing projects, you have to get it done as quick as you can because we're not working with millions of dollars. But yeah, so I'd say that, and I also. One of my inspirations is a cinematographer called Roger Deakins. He shot stuff like Skyfall and No Country for Old Men and Blade Runner 2049. So a lot of his work, I always kind of look to inspiration. And obviously, we're not shooting science fiction, but you can still take elements of that and use it in
I think I have different responses to different films as well. I think some things I like purely as like a fan of it, and then some things I really take sort of inspiration as a filmmaker from as well. So obviously, you said big Bond fan, and I like Hong Kong and Kung Fu movies too, but I don't really put that into the work I do. It's a recent thing, so I really liked Everything Everywhere All at Once that came out. Again, that's by a director duo as well. They're called the Daniels, but that's their first name, both called Daniel. But that's something that really has so many different parts to it in terms of all those different things. It's really colourful in terms of like the techniques behind it, but also there's a really good performance from the lead actor, and it explores really sort of nice like themes in its core as well about sort of maternal and daughter relationships. So films that have all those different layers to them are really the best, really. I think that's kind of what I said, when you walk away from a film that doesn't feel right, it's because one of those key ingredients is missing, really. It's style over substance or something like that.
Thanks. Got another question? Yes.
From a marketing perspective, what are your recommendations for video for social media, which tends to be definitely the biggest pain in my life at the moment? How do you recommend making video like the best fit for social media channels?
In terms of the technical side of it, or in terms of the
what
content?
is a good video for social media?
Obviously, the key thing is always the length of it. There needs to be something punchy and engaging. So as I was saying before, if you don't want to be talking to the camera for 5 minutes to try and capture someone's attention, because even if,
I did post that video yesterday.
it wasn't 5, it was only 3.5 minutes, so you were fine. But it's fine if people already know you. You know, we were talking about this actually, because people watch YouTube videos which are like half an hour long of just someone talking to camera.
Yeah, you mean more in like in that initial grabbing attention. Yeah. When there's an embedded audience, then you can really then obviously really channel that longer content. But when you've got that first introduction of a company, that's when you need to really have something that's like got a real hook or angle to it.
Yeah.
But I think also with the social media thing, obviously you can't really do, if it's a short clip and it's for social media, you can't really do a short film, but you can still take some of those disciplines and techniques and put it into it. So you still look at like those things like, what's the company colour scheme, what's their heritage, all that kind of stuff could build into a nice little story for them, really.
But I did like your video, it was good.
I can't see, I think there's somebody at the back, Hi.
What's your vision or long-term goal for Trett films? Is there anyone that you really want to work with?
I think it's just doing kind of bigger clients, I think, because a lot of the stuff, obviously with bigger clients, bigger budgets as well, because a lot of the stuff we're trying to pull off is very difficult when you're working with kind of such small budgets.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think just obviously big goal is like a John Lewis style advert with that kind of money. But yeah, I'd say something like that maybe.
Yeah, I think definitely be able to work on more ambitious projects who are always constantly challenged by sort of time and money, really.
Yeah.
But yeah, and also grow the team as well. We'd like to have sort of like a strong team of Trett films that Norwich just does. We work with some.
Yeah.
Some of the
brothers left as well. So.
Yeah, the Trett's we spend it. And also, yeah, I'd like to sort of maybe look into actually doing feature films and really doing a proper theatrical release at some point.
Yeah.
Just about sort of time, but yeah.
I was just going to say, some founders of businesses, especially when you've got the creative skill and everything, find it hard to, will you become more of a business person, with the business side of it, or do you, really passionately want to keep to the more creative?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it would have to be like a conversation. I think.
So I don't want to put you.
Yeah, no. I think obviously because like the way Trett films move forward, I think in that sense would have its own creative things for me to be able to sort of still be involved with. But I also would also have to step back from sort of the more minute details and not sort of micromanage the whole thing. So just don't think that would be possible.
Yeah, that's one of the things we do always think about when talking about growing, is that we want to keep the same style to every single thing. So say we did grow our team and we weren't actually working on every single project how we are at the moment, as that kind of worry of, maybe this won't be quite the same quality. So that is one of our worries of growing teams.
Yeah.
It's a growing challenge, isn't it?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Do we have any more? I think, yes, 2 more. Gentlemen there.
Typically, what kind of like films are you working on?
To be honest, a lot of them are kind of 30 seconds, which is
That's really
a challenge.
Yeah.
Because we're talking about telling stories, and obviously the story kind of has an ABC to get the way you need to get on that. Sorry, A to Z. More letters.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's always the biggest challenge of kind of setting up that story and kind of having a resolution to everything in 30 seconds, still selling a product or service,
Yeah.
and leaving an emotion. So
I do quite like that as a challenge if I was to do something in 30 seconds, and sometimes we had to do even shorter versions. So it's a real sort of like nice test of your skills. You have to like, okay, you've got to tick all these boxes as a piece of branded content and be able to sort of maybe increase sales or something, and also work as a nice creative piece. It's always quite nice to have that. Like, okay, now you've got to do it in 30 seconds. Go.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I think we'll just take one final question from the gentleman at the back there.
Hi there. You talked about the emotional content of the film, how important that is to you. I just wondered where you get the inspiration from that for your purely from the film you're making, or does it come from the client? If it comes from the client, how do you sort of read that when you're meeting and doing that sort of discovery aspect?
Yeah. It really depends on project to project, but a lot of the kind of things that we end up pitching for, they don't ever always set out saying, oh, we want an emotional piece which is going to make people feel this or that. Most of the time it is, oh, we need a video which is going to, like more businessy stuff, like it needs to show this, needs to show that, and then that's where we kind of come in and kind of put our kind of story into that.
Yeah.
So it's almost like a mixture of ticking all their boxes while also making an emotional story.
Yeah, but as I said, I think it does. We do pull those things from what the client already has and find a way to make them cinematic and emotive. So, for example, we work with Gasway a lot, who, install boilers and do your heating. It's not. You try and film a boiler if you're the most talented DOT. It's not very photogenic. But you take what the result of their service is, which is you have like a family who's really got like hot water and warmth, and you kind of build the cinematography, which is warm colours, and the story around that kind of thing. So you pull it from what the client already has and find a way to make it emotive.
Great, I think we're going to leave it at that. So thank you so much.